Midway USA brand product designers have one straightforward goal: develop high-quality, technically sound products and deliver them to customers at reasonable prices. If you are immersed in the shooting sports industry and pay close attention to every single detail, you know our products are built right and stand up to everyday use. Who has shooting mats and range bag systems to hunting clothing and just about everything for the outdoors? Log on and shop 24/7 with super fast shipping. MidwayUSA.com.
At Midway USA, we put customers first. The Nitro Express shipping system is icing on the cake. It was a big investment of time and money to take super fast, low-cost shipping to a whole new level. The Nitro Express helps ensure same-day shipping and low shipping cost. We hope you enjoy the Nitro Express. We built it just for you. For just about everything for the outdoors, go to MidwayUSA.com.
I'm Larry Potterfield with Midway USA. Thanks for your business.
Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of CastingAcross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. This is the 333rd episode. Had I had foresight, I would have reached out to the good people of Cortland and said, hey, how about I give away a 333 fly line? But I didn't do that, and they're not a sponsor, so you just get to hear me muse about it on the fly. But today we're talking about something that I get asked about a lot. And this is one of the things that I really should pay more attention to. The kind of content I generate ought to reflect the kind of interest that I am shown. And what do I mean by that? A question that I consistently get asked, both by readers and listeners to Casting Across, the podcast and the website, and folks that I run across in my daily life, folks in my church, folks in my community, and then folks that have interviewed me on their podcasts, has been this similar question: how do you fish? Not like, how do I fish? Like, tell me about a fly rod. Not how do you fish? Like, what do you do to make trout bite your fly? How do you fish? And what they mean by that is, how do you fish? A guy with 5 kids, how do you find time to fish? A guy who's in ministry, who has a job that has just kind of, very inconsistent hours and a lot of, direct responsibilities. How do you fish? A guy who has chosen to spend a lot of time writing about and talking about fly fishing. How do you find time to go fly fishing? It's a good question. And it's a question that is worth talking about. It's a question that's worth discussing and answering. Reason being, I'm not the only busy person in the world. I'm not the only one with a job that has some pretty significant requirements and responsibilities. I'm not the only one who has a handful of auxiliary hobbies and activities. I'm also not the only one with a big family. And regardless of what your situation is, I think a principle that holds true is that no matter what situation you find yourself in life, your life is full. Okay? There's very few people who say, I don't have a lot going on. And usually the people that don't have a lot going on, their time is consumed with what they don't have going on. But that's for another day's conversation. So today I'm going to talk about 5 things that you ought to be doing if you're busy and you want to be fly fishing. All right? 5 things that you should be doing. And some of them actively involve doing something, and some of them are the more important work of the doing something in between your own 2 ears, how to think about fly fishing when you are busy. And so this is not a comprehensive thing, but again, this is something I've been asked about really at length. And I think if you go and listen to any of the podcasts that I've been on, other podcasts, there's a very good chance they ask me about this once they find out kind of what's going on in life. But again, this is not some sort of comparison game. And that's actually something we're going to talk about here in a second, because I know there's folks that are significantly more busy than I am that you could ask this question to and would have maybe different answers than me. But this is my podcast. So we're talking about my 5 things that you can do to fly fish if you're busy. And the first one is perspective. The first one is perspective. And this is all about being content where you are and not comparing yourself to others. So it is illogical if you look on Instagram, you look on Facebook, and you see people that are just average, everyday people like you and me catching fish every day. If there's an opportunity, perhaps, for that to be your life, but there's a good chance that's not your life, okay? And you need to be okay with that. And that sounds very common sense, but I think it just bears repeating. that a lot of what you see online is cultivated and curated in order to communicate something. I can say that about casting across. I put things together in a certain order, in a certain way to kind of promote the website and promote the podcast. I don't make any, there's no illusion about that, but it's basically kind of my life on a day-to-day basis. But that perspective matters so much, and being content with where you are, not playing the comparison game. Another example, if I looked at some of the other fly fishing podcasts and fly fishing websites and said, that is the standard, then I get discouraged very quickly, because I'm not going to spend the time and energy and resources to put out something that an entire team of people with brand backing put together, when I'm just doing this by myself for fun and because I enjoy interacting with folks. So where I am and where some other podcasts and websites are two very different places, and that's fine. And so I can't compare myself to them. The same is true with yourself and your fishing. If you are a trout angler that lives in Nebraska, you can't compare yourself to somebody who lives in Colorado. If you are a saltwater angler who lives in North Dakota, you can't compare yourself to somebody who lives in Florida. It is just going to drive you absolutely bonkers. And the same thing is true with age and stage, right? Where are you in life? What are your resources? What is your availability? You cannot compare yourself maybe to an empty nester that has a lot of cash on hand. Nor can you compare yourself to somebody who just maybe got out of college and is just taking some time to go and have fun. Both of those places in life are great, and there's opportunities for a lot of folks to potentially go through one or both of them, but not everyone has those things. And then also, and not to get too philosophical, but a lot of times the good things that you have in your busy life are things that you've worked for and you've strived for, and that you would eventually, maybe even very, very quickly, miss if you were to become a trout bum, if you were to go live on the beach for a few weeks. This idea that our culture has sold us about dropping off and, just living it up, it is an artificial thing. And a lot of the folks that give that a shot, they're not happy. It's a vacation is a vacation because it is a vacation. That profound statement. What do I mean by that? It's special because it's temporary. It's special because there's a contrast between normal and that vacation. The same thing is true of a fly fishing trip. I know a lot of folks that on day 4 of fly fishing trips, they started to be done. And you'd say, no way, not me. I'd be ready to go. You know what? You're going to start thinking about those emails piling up. You're going to start thinking about the responsibilities back home. You're going to start missing your family. And you know what? Your shoulder's going to get tired and your ankles are going to hurt because it's not what you're used to. And a lot of times it is that perspective that makes it so sweet. It is I'm going to take 3 days and do this every summer with a friend. And although there may be fishing in between those times, it's that one pinnacle mountaintop moment that kind of keeps you going within the context of fly fishing. So all that to say, have contentment, don't compare yourself, and maintain that healthy perspective. So that's the first thing. I know that's not super practical. It's not like, go do this thing, go to this stream, pick up this stuff. But we'll get to some of those here in a second. But the second thing I wanted to mention is having goals. Now, the goals are something that is, needs some balance. You need to have goals that are reasonable. So this is the example I use all the time. If you say, hey, I'm going to hire a guide, or I'm going to pay $4,000 to spend 3.5 days at a fly fishing lodge, I am going to catch so many trout. You are going to be so very disappointed because that doesn't always happen. I've been to those kind of situations and had mediocre trips, kind of from a quantitative standpoint. From a qualitative standpoint, it's also always very, very good. But from a quantitative standpoint, number of fish caught, be like, okay, that was good. That's kind of what I would have done if I would have just done a DIY trip. But you know what? It was fun to do it in that place and that way. I've had times that have been fantastic. And of course, like everyone else, I've had times that have stunk. But you know what? That's just the goal and the expectation you need. Well, not the goal. That's the expectation you need to set for fly fishing. Your goals are to go and try hard and to have a fun time doing something. All right, that's what our goal ought to be. It might be, my goal is to catch a trout on this kind of fly or catch this new species or whatever, and that's all fine and good. But our goal isn't going to be, my goal is to catch 55 fish. My goal is to have my shoulder hurt by lunchtime. My goal is to catch a world record. You know what? You can set those, but that's definitely the kind of thing that shouldn't shift into the expectations. And so having healthy goals, healthy expectations, I think that's the second thing. Because again, you're participating in an activity that even if you find time to get out on the water, there's no guarantees that all the stars are going to align. And this is where folks get really frustrated. I've heard it so many times. I have been planning this for a long time. I have not been fishing for months. And then I go and the weather's bad. You know what? If you have the contentment of getting out and getting away based on the cloud cover, it's going to be really hard to please you. And so that's just, I think, one of the things that also needs to be done is first have that right perspective, balance your contentment, don't make comparisons. Secondly, have reasonable goals and reasonable expectations. And another thing, I have been to stocked trout ponds before, like private water, where they just throw giant fish in there. And it's happened a few times where someone says, "Hey, come on out and fish, and then tell people how great it is." And so I'll tell people what it is, and I'm not going to say it's great because it's a stocked trout pond. But there's been times I've been to these places, and the fish aren't biting. And so if a place like that can have a day where the fish aren't going to bite, you better believe that you go to any blue ribbon trout river, any trophy flat down in the Caribbean, and you're going to get skunked and you're going to have hard days. So setting yourself up for the right goals and the right expectations is so, so important. All right, some more practical things. The third one is integration. How can you integrate fly fishing into your life? So for me, the most simple one is I have been doing it with my kids since they can pick up a fly rod. The baby hasn't started yet because at the time of recording, he's only a month old, but everybody else has been out with a fly rod as soon as they can walk and as soon as they can be near water. I usually let them play around the fly rod and then give them a little spin casting situation with a worm and a bobber, because my goal is not to create great fly fishers. My goal is to create kids that love the outdoors and love being with their family. That's my goal. And I am just very confident that if I do that well and I do as good as I can with loving them in that way outside in creation, and they know that I fly fish, and I give them opportunities to do that, and I'm as patient as I can be, which of course is a very, very hard thing to do, then they're going to want to go fly fishing. And here I am, 13 years later with my oldest, and we're going on a fly fishing trip in a couple of weeks. And that investment in them is now paying off. Now, I definitely don't want to make it seem like for the last 13 years, I have never gone fly fishing. I've just untangled my kids as they've goofed around in the canoe or on the shore. No, we do that, but I am just very blessed in that I get to go fishing for, a couple hours, for a couple days, and in some amazing places. But that investment and that integration of fly fishing into parenting is now yielding some great results. It is bearing some great fruit in that we are going to be able to fly fish more and more together. But it's not just family. Although I would say, think about this in this way, take your brother-in-law fly fishing. Try to see if your father-in-law wants to fly fish. And then family functions, if there's enough of you, it's not you escaping and bailing. It's doing another fun family thing together. This is what I'm talking about when I mention integration. But it doesn't just have to be family. It can also be work. Do you have a job where that's a reasonable thing you could do? I mean, a lot of stuff gets done on the golf course. A lot of stuff gets done out at dinner. Is there a way that you can talk to a client, or you can talk to a potential client and say, hey, would you want to try fly fishing? And if they already fly fish, then you can say, hey, let's go fly fishing. Now, again, I do not know your job. I do not know your situation. That might be the last good idea, but there are folks that have done it and it has worked out well. So is that something that you just haven't maybe thought about and you can give it a shot? Or even within the context of your company. Now, your coworkers might be the last people that you want to spend extra time with. But for folks who enjoy the people they work with, is it a possibility that if you have any say in corporate functions, in retreats, in what is done kind of on the shoulders of a weekend away or something like that for your company, that you can incorporate fly fishing? And again, this is where you might have to make some compromises. You might say, you know what, I didn't really want my fly fishing to be with so-and-so from accounting, but I get to fly fish more if so-and-so from accounting is there. So again, not a bait and switch, not some sort of trick, not trying to get one over on your company or getting them to expense your fly fishing trip, but is this a way that you can maybe add a little bit more into your time on the water? I'll be the first to admit I'm not great at this. I mean, I do have that flexibility in ministry where I could do this more if I wanted to. Personally, it's hard for me to justify. It's not hard for me to justify going fly fishing with somebody because I do that. The harder thing for me is to take a 4 to 6 hour chunk of time or an entire day out of a week. In slower seasons when a lot of people are on vacation, I am able to do that. But I just want to say that it's an idea. It's something that I do from time to time. But I also acknowledge it is hard when you have a lot of responsibilities and you have a lot of things on your plate. This isn't just like, oh yeah, just incorporate fly fishing into work. It does require some forethought. It does require some planning, and it isn't for everybody. So that is the third thing. So the first one is perspective. Second is goals and expectations. The third one is integrating fly fishing into life in some other way. And again, it's not going to necessarily turn into like, oh, now I have so many more fishing trips. There's a little bit more fly fishing in my life. All right. The fourth one is margin time. And I've talked about this just quite a bit over the years because this is where I have found, especially in my last, I don't know, maybe 15 years since I've vocationally been in ministry, this is where a lot of my fly fishing comes alive. But as I've thought about it, back when I lived on trout water, back when I lived on some just fantastic spring creeks and freestone streams in south central Pennsylvania, I did not spend a lot of full days on the water. Those full days on the water were actually like destination trips. I spent a lot of get out of work, go fish for an hour, and then go home and kind of take care of things. Or wake up a little bit early, go fishing for a little bit, and then show up at the office. Most of my fly fishing, when I was fly fishing 4, 5, 6 times a week, was that kind of margin time fly fishing. And one of the benefits then was because I just kind of had the option. I had the availability, and I was driving over these rivers anyway to get to work. Now, it's the kind of thing where if it works with your family, if it works with your schedule, if it dovetails with how you work and spend your time, that you can do it with very limited or minimal interruptions to everything else you have going on. It's less obtrusive. It's less offensive if you can find a way to sneak it in. For example, duck hunting just doesn't bother my family because I'm up well before they are. I'm out and then I'm back at like breakfast time. And so it doesn't, bother them because that's the best time to hunt. And, I could sit out there all day, but, and I do from time to time, but more often than not, it's, hey, let me just go catch that morning flight and then I'm back. And so it's work to wake up early. It's work to get everything loaded up and everything ready to go for a couple hours. But to me, that is better than saying, well, I'm only going to go once a month for all day. I'd rather go a couple times a week, the entire season, and have to do that extra labor of waking up early a few days just for a few hours of hunting. Or, and as for our purposes of this conversation, for fly fishing, then to say, you know what, I'm going to see if I can just get one good trip in each season. I'd rather get in a little bit of time. And so what does that mean? It means you probably aren't going to be fishing the premier trout fisheries because I know I don't have that opportunity now where I live to get to like a premier trout situation from where I sit right now. We're talking hours, but I know where there's stock trout. I know there's warm water fish. I know where I can get into carp. And you know what? That's fine and good. Do that for a half an hour. Do that for an hour. Carry gear in the back of the car if you have time in between things. If you're able to, just instead of sitting and checking email again and doing, one more little piddly job, go and cast for half an hour. And make that fit, make that good, be content with that, and let that kind of string you along from one fly fishing trip to the next fly fishing trip. Putting that margin time in, and again, having that lead to your contentment. I would rather fish intermittently here and there in this way and have the life that I live than constantly being jet setting, going from Christmas Island to Patagonia to New Zealand to Colorado to Alaska, whatever. All right. I mean, that sounds fun. it's just so conceptually abstract right now for my time of life. Hey, if that's what you're doing, fantastic. I have a good feeling that folks who do that aren't listening to Casting Across. All right, so perspective and contentment. Secondly, goals versus expectations. Thirdly, integration. How can you creatively fit fly fishing into your life? Fourthly, margin time. Where can you put fly fishing where it's not obtrusive or offensive to your life and to those who rely on you? And lastly, just stay plugged in with the fly fishing culture. So one of the jokes and the memes and whatever is, the person who goes fly fishing once a year says that they're a fly fisher or they're an angler or whatever. And I'm fine with that. If that's your thing, great. If you go once a year, phenomenal. Back when I worked at a fly shop, I would sell gear to people like that, and their excitement for using that expensive rod for 1 week, the 1 week they went to Montana a year, that's fine and good. If that's how they want to spend their money, if that's what makes them happy, then that's fantastic. I mean, there's a lot of my family that I only see once a year, and it doesn't make it any less real. It doesn't make it any less, that connection is not fake, right? Because it's of distance and time and things like that. The same is true with fly fishing. So if you are only fly fishing maybe once a year, once a season, once a month, go down the line. People who fish every day, people think that people that fish once a month are, weak sauce. The people that fish, every once a month think the people that only fish once a year are weak sauce. Whatever it is, don't do that. It's fine. Wherever you are, do it and enjoy it. Okay. But one of the ways that you can stay plugged in is being a part of the culture. So you're doing that right now by listening to this podcast, by making kind of fly fishing stuff fill up some of that quiet space in your life. Read fly fishing books, take up fly tying, watch videos, go to fly fishing related classes at your local fly shop, go to the fly fishing shows in the dark of winter, go and read, not just blogs and books, but just other fly fishing content, novels, have those be fly fishing related. Just kind of fill your life with fly fishing stuff. Again, not to the point where it's obtrusive, not to the point where it's obnoxious, but it will keep that simmer on that pot, and it will keep you plugged in. Now, some people will say, well, if I do that, I'm just going to want to go fishing. Okay, well, know yourself and know what that limit is. Don't make it so that it is tempting. Don't make it so that it is detrimental. Don't make it so that it's not good for your relationships and things like that. But stay plugged in with the culture. Join Trout Unlimited. Pitch in with conservation projects. Again, see what your local fly shop has going on. See what other groups there are, and just find ways to make that part of your regular routine. And I would say that actually is another good thing to do. Again, in conversation with the people that are closest to you, is there a way I can kind of schedule this? So it's not just this thing that's gnawing at the back of your head until you're ready to go crazy. And then it's like, I need to go away this weekend. Don't do that. Find ways to schedule things, whether it be actual fly fishing or fly fishing adjacent activities. So anyway, that was one's kind of rambling, but I guess I just got bothered because I've had enough people that have said, oh, you only fly fish X amount. You're not really a fly fisher. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. That's not true. I've heard stupider, but it's up there. All right. So the 5 things for folks who are busy to fly fish: perspective, keeping contentment and not comparing yourself. Secondly, setting reasonable and realistic goals and expectations. Thirdly, integration. How do you find ways to make fly fishing part of other aspects of your life? Because there ought to be some bleed over. Now, actually, let me step into that one real quick. Some people say, no, I do this to escape. All right. That's fine. If that's what you want to do, that's great. I personally appreciate the holistic aspect of fly fishing and incorporating it into other things. So, whatever you want to do with that one, you can take that one, but you can integrate it if you want to. Fourthly, margin time. How can you add fly fishing into those parts of your day that are not going to be obtrusive to your work, to your family? How can you do that with making the least amount of impact? And then fifthly, stay plugged in with the culture. Find fly fishing related things to do and keep doing those to keep the pot at a simmer between the times where you're doing more active fly fishing stuff. Is there something that I miss? Is one of those things far off? You let me know. Matthew at castingacross.com. As I always say, I'm ready for your questions, your comments, and your accusations if you do ever have any of them. This week on castingacross.com, the first article is called Fly Rod FAQs for the Backcountry. So this continues a series and a growing kind of catalog of questions I've been asked more than a couple of times about fly rods. And I answer 4 that are specifically about small stream backcountry fly rods in this article. And so you can read those 5 on this article. And then there's a link to the greater catalog where there's, I don't know, maybe 25, 30 questions and answers on that page. Wednesday's article is called Video, Ranking the Fly Fishing Works of James Prosek. Ranking the fly fishing works of James Prosek. So James Prosek, great author and just phenomenal watercolor painter. I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but you know what I mean. And here I go through his 6 fly fishing works, and it's in a video, so you get to see the books, you get to see some of the illustrations. But I'm really interested to see if people have different perspectives than I do. So if you have a different list than I do, or a different order to that list, let me know over at castingacross.com or in the YouTube comments on that video. This week's recommendation on the podcast is Sierra. It used to be Sierra Trading Post, and I've recommended them before, but Sierra is probably a store that you have close to you, maybe even closer than a fly shop. And I am not saying it's anything near a fly shop, but especially online, there's some really good things worth grabbing. And right now, they have a lot of good stuff. They have waders and rods and reels that are all at fantastic prices, and they're all closeout stuff. So you're not necessarily like, taking something away from a fly shop. You're buying closeout stuff. And, there's nothing wrong with shopping on a budget. But same company that owns TJ Maxx, Marshalls, Home Goods, and HomeSense. But head over there. I like to check them out every now and again. This is where I get some backup stuff. This is where I find something that kind of rounds things out. I remember when I was going down to Florida a few years ago, I went and found some tropical fly line that was on wicked clearance. It was fantastic. So I'll put a link there, but definitely check it out. It's a good way to augment your outdoor gear shopping. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing podcast. Please subscribe in your favorite podcast app and then rate the podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.
Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, Fishing Booker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, Fishing Booker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. Fishing Booker. Fishing trips made easy.
From dawn to dusk and every moment in between, Captain Justin Leake and Meredith McCord have an exciting adventure waiting in the water. Catch Chasing the Sun, Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV. Waypoint TV, your destination for outdoor entertainment.